There is a cost to failure, and often it is paid by those who are most innocent. Such is probably the case when it comes to Pixar, which now is indeed bearing the brunt of box office busts and flops over the past few years. Surely the folks at Disney Animation also must be feeling quite nervous, quite scared. Folks, we do not take any joy in people losing their jobs. And yet we must report to you honestly and accurately that hundreds of employees of Pixar are now saying goodbye. Over the next year, Pixar plans to cut more than 300 positions. And folks, we think this may be, possibly, the beginning of streamlining Pixar and Disney Animation Studios together. Perhaps not publicly, but privately. All of this breaking late yesterday, and we're going to get to explaining entertainment for you and keeping you ahead of the culture curve because it's what we do. Unfortunately, there is a cost to going woke. The woke don't work. Folks, we're going to get to the breaking news about Pixar and the job cuts. Before we do, though, I'd like to go to a video we did back on June 6, 2023, very briefly, just to show you that we indeed were reporting that this was coming. And why? Well, because we keep you ahead of the culture curve. At the same time this video came out, there were articles all over the web telling us that, well, Elemental was picking up steam at the box office, and Disney Plus was a great place for these movies. It would be A-okay at Pixar. Things were just fine, hunky-dory. We said no. Let's roll the tape, and then, folks, I think we'll all agree, watching this channel, you knew this was going to be coming down the pike. Maybe those who just follow the mainstream did not. Last week at Walt Disney World is that Pixar is going to focus on sequels going forward and not new stories. Now, what does that mean? Well, Steve, it means that Disney has lost confidence in Pixar to create new IPs. All right. Otherwise, if Pixar was making great money with new stuff, then you better believe Disney would say, make more new stuff. They're saying stop. And they're telling investors, because guess what? It's bad enough that they know investors need to hear this. Right? It's not just bad enough that it's internal. It's bad enough that it's external. They're literally telling investors, yeah, we told Pixar, stop it. Start making retreads, please. And not Lightyear crap. We're talking about Toy Story 7. We're talking about Monsters, Inc., where they go to Monsters Assisted Living. I don't care what it is. Exactly. They're going to do derivative stuff because they've lost the confidence in Pixar. Steve?
I feel like there's a channel that we know that's talked about this at least 8 months ago.
Who might it be?
I really don't know. It's like, I feel like it's right in my face and I'm missing it.
Slowly turn in the direction of the WDW Pro avatar, Steve. There you go. This out of Reuters, coming out at 6:24 p.m. Eastern Time. Disney-owned animation studio Pixar poised to undergo layoffs in 2024. This from originally TechCrunch, I suppose. And this is not surprising at all. It's, number one, not surprising because of the last 2 years that Pixar has had. They've been absolutely horrendous. Pixar also, this is not good timing for Pixar, but it really may speak to why, it may speak to Disney just being stuck, because Disney's about to release 3 Pixar movies into theaters. And this is breaking literally. Hang on a second. This is, guys, am I mistaken? Is this literally the day that Soul is hitting theaters? Did Soul hit theaters today? Somebody check that for me.
I'm gonna check it right now.
Check it, please. If we get this announcement on the exact same date that Soul hits theaters, that is a kidney punch. Walt Disney owned animation
January
studio
12th.
Pixar.
It's released tomorrow.
Shoot! But if it's open tomorrow, I don't know.
It should be previewing tonight.
Right, it might get him depending on where you are. So this is just a gut punch. Walt Disney owned animation studio Pixar is set to undergo layoffs as high as 20% this year. TechCrunch reported on Thursday, citing the company. Wow. The job cuts would see Pixar's team of 1,300 reduced to 1,000 over the coming months. That's not small. TechCrunch reported. So, wow. Citing sources at the company. Again, citing sources. According to the online paper, Pixar said those employee numbers were too high. Okay. The studio said the number of impacted employees were still being determined due to factors like production schedules and staffing for future greenlit films, the report added, which would indicate that maybe this is just the beginning. That's really something, too. Layoffs were not imminent, but will take place later this year as Pixar focuses on making less content. That also is brand new.
Yeah.
So all of this breaking, and folks, if you're just returning, we went back live. We had to end the member stream because of this breaking news. This is really something. So we have watched Pixar fail dramatically. We have discussed here on this channel in the past that perhaps they're looking at, even if it's not publicly done, even if it's behind the scenes, perhaps they would integrate Pixar and Disney Animation Studios together and streamline what they're doing. This would be the way that would happen if it is occurring. I don't know that it is, but wow, what a story breaking. 20%. This is the sort of thing, we've been reporting. Well, we were going to report, I guess, this weekend. We may have to change it on Amazon Prime Video doing layoffs, and that seems to be correlated with Lord of the Rings, even despite Amazon Prime surpassing Disney Plus easily as the number 2 streamer in the world. But this is huge news. Panel, I'm going to turn it over to you and see what you all think about this. Starting with John, I guess. John, what are your thoughts on Pixar now looking at 20% job layoffs?
Yeah, I don't think this is really surprising. I think this is something that we kind of expected. We had reports of this coming in after the kind of the SAG after the strikes and all that stuff, that there would be contractions in the number of productions that were being put out. And so that obviously would mean probably job loss. And we're seeing that. Obviously, you mentioned Prime Video, and now we're seeing it with Pixar. One can only expect that we will see this from other studios as well. So it's not, I don't think it's very out of the blue or very surprising. It is kind of a product of the strikes and the deal that they struck, and the studios cutting back on a lot of the productions that they were doing. They're no longer chasing that the Wall Street carrot that had been stuck out in front of them with a lot of the streaming platform carrot that they had been chasing. Wall Street is now saying, where are your profits at? So, and they're having to adjust accordingly. And so it's a shame that some of these people are probably getting let go. They're probably good, hard workers. And they're probably not the people that do need to be fired, which is the people that have made these atrocious decisions, such as the people behind the Lightyear film, the people behind Turning Red, et cetera, that have seen these abysmal flops at the box office. Those are the people that are probably still be there, still be in charge, and they're going to be letting go the people who are kind of keeping their head down, getting the work done, and moving on. I assume that they're probably not going to be firing a lot of their activists and ideologues that are
John,
embedded there.
How could this happen if this isn't also happening at Disney Animation? Because Disney Animation Studios just had a horrible experience with Wish. Let's get into this now. And we've got, this is amazing that this is coming out and cited by the company. I don't know what's going on at Disney. They've lost their minds. Because on the exact same day, John, you sent this over to me. This is an official release by the Walt Disney Company. We're on the Walt Disney Company's website. Pixar's Pete Docter on why he's excited for Soul Luca and Turning Red to hit theaters. Talk about whistling past the graveyard. 3 films from Disney and Pixar are coming to movie theaters for the first time ever, and Pete Docter is eager for fans to see them in a new way. 2020's Soul, 2021's Luca, and 2022's Turning Red are having special engagement theatrical runs this year, with Soul hitting theaters this weekend. We covered in a video earlier this week, by the way, folks, that if you go watch these, Disney will give you a free ticket to Inside Out 2. That's how desperate they are.
Yes,
we chatted with Doctor about how the theatrical experience adds to the films, which one is best to see in theaters, and why Anxiety could be the breakout star of this summer's Inside Out 2. Probably a good idea to ask, is this also a chance for our utter downfall? The idea that kids are going to be hugging anxiety plushies. That just doesn't seem to me to be a good idea. That said, wow.
Do we think Pete Docter knew? I mean, that's
Pete Docter. There's no way Pete Docter didn't know.
Okay.
Rumor and speculation, but human wisdom and logic would have to say.
So then maybe he was excited that this was going to be the most content offering coming from Pixar in a while. That's why he was excited. I mean, look, Elemental underperformed at the box office, right? We had a Wish take 7 weeks to break the $200 million mark.
Wish is at Disney Animation.
Lightyear.
you got to be freaking out if you're Disney Animation. If you're
Yeah.
Disney Animation right now, you're as freaked out as Pixar, because at least Pixar knows it's 20%. Disney Animation people don't even know what number it might be.
And that could be, I mean, we've seen that they want to reduce animation budgets going forward right here. We saw we saw Migration coming out of Illumination take Universal over the edge in order to bring that entire studio to eclipse Disney in the annual box office gross right there. Like, and that film was produced for $75 million. If they can do it, maybe so can we. And this is the first step in doing that. Do we necessarily think that this is like the first step in maybe merging these studios?
Oh, I think it's a definite possibility at this point, even if they don't do it publicly. Hughes, you were bringing up some of these movies that have failed.
I not only is Pixar laying off people, but I did make a video on this one day ago. BlackRock is also laying off 600 of its employees as well. So this may be like the continuing slow death of woke in Hollywood, okay, or possibly in general. But Pixar, I expected these layoffs to come. I didn't expect it like to happen so soon, but at the same time, it does seem like a little bit of a long time in the making and everything. But it's like, this is what happens though. And I'm also like what John Trent brought up something else and everything. Well, but it also makes me wonder how many people who works for Pixar and everything are those who are DEI hires. And I'm not talking about those just because they're female, black, minority, certain gender, so on and so forth. No, I'm talking about those who are actively promoting DEI out there, okay? Trying to promote the agenda itself, trying to promote it throughout everything. I'm wondering exactly how many of those individuals are. They didn't announce, which section of Pixar it is. They didn't announce like which population, but they also stated that in the article from Reuters that you shared, they're starting off with like 1,300 employees, and then later on in the coming months another 1,000. So
Hughes, what you bring up, this is actually, I had not thought of this. When we're looking at the firing practices of Hollywood, we know the hiring practices. We know that Hollywood has been, and Disney and the WGA and all of them, they're obsessed with hiring based on immutable differences. We
Instead
don't
of
know
merit.
how the firing will happen, right? And I would say too that at the very least, these layoffs are likely the consequence of failure. It turns out that failure has a real and pragmatic effect, and that you should avoid at all costs. And the people who have been gib about these movies, and they think that, oh, well, it's art. It doesn't matter how it does in the box office. It's doing fine on Disney Plus. Remember all the arguments that, well, these are Disney Plus shows. They're doing great on streaming.
Watch the trades out there try to defend Disney as well, or try to steal away from this and everything from Pixar being like layoffs happening. Who's next? That's what I'm wondering. Who's next? Could it be Marvel? Could it be Lucasfilm? Who is next? That's what I'm wondering. Could it be Disney Plus employees being fired as well?
Tigress, your thoughts on where Pixar is versus where it was just a few years ago?
I find it sad. I'm not surprised it's happening. It's just, I hate to see people losing their jobs.
Absolutely. No fun.
Because full well the people who are losing their jobs are the ones that draw. It's not, as I think John brought up, it's not the ones that are making the decisions. It's not the ones that potentially are putting together the stories. It's the ones that are doing the actual creation. But, you give people something that they don't want, eventually people are going to walk away. And Hughes seems to be having a fit over something.
She just brought up a good point that just made me think, what if they're trying to integrate AI now?
Well, I'm sure they are trying to integrate AI, and that's what Disney was pushing for during the negotiations over the past year. But
apparently we're going to have a shareholders vote on it, right?
One of the things...
Yeah, this is what happens when you fire John Lasseter.
Yes, and perhaps the unionization attempts have had an impact as well. All of that said, one of the things that Film Threat has been talking about with their D-Files, and folks, we recommend you go check out Film Threat for sure. They've been doing just a fantastic job. They have discovered through people who've been talking to them that it looks like the workforce at Pixar and perhaps Disney Animation Studios had become so partisan, we'll just say that, so ideologically driven, that they would often have to outsource the animation to other companies because their animators refused to do the work when it wasn't aligned with their beliefs. John, as we, I guess, wrap up the show today, your final thoughts on Pixar. You have been covering this for years. We have now come to the culmination of collapse, and this is what it looks like, and it sucks for the people who lose their jobs, and it's why you should chase success at every possible place.
Yeah, you don't you're not laying off 20% of your workforce if your product is being profitable and your division is doing really well. At least not, you wouldn't typically do that. Obviously, I know in these days and times, sometimes they do that because they want to increase their profit margin, which I think is a little greedy and unethical and immoral. But I don't think this is the case. I think we see a clear example of multiple failures over the course of the past 5 years, and this is what happens. That you end up having to cut jobs and you end up having to shrink. And we've seen Bob Iger say this over the past year and a half, ever since he's kind of been back, that they're going to be cutting back on the number of productions that they're going to be doing. They're going to be scaling back on a lot of their costs. And obviously, one of the big things that companies have that are costs are the human capital costs. And so that's what they're going to be cutting back. So I expect Pixar is just the first. I think, as Hughes pointed out, I think we're probably going to see Disney animation cuts. I would not be surprised if we see Lucasfilm cuts. We already kind of saw some of that a little bit when in some of the Ahsoka post interviews. I think it was kind of got buried, but one of their production guys said that the costs had been significantly reduced for Ahsoka, which was kind of surprising to me, given the fact that we had just heard Katie Sackhoff talk about how their catering budgets were so high on The Mandalorian. So I think Disney is cutting back across the board. And that is in response to the Wall Street money men basically saying, "Hey, you got to be profitable now," and they're not going to let these companies kind of just spend absolute insane amounts of money chasing subscribers. It's about like, what is your actual return on investment now, and that's what people are looking for, and that's kind of what's coming. And I do think this is also in reaction to Peltz and his move, and he probably has a lot to do with this as well. He's putting a lot of pressure on them. One of the big things that he has stated, we know publicly that he has stated, is the fact that he thinks that the Walt Disney Company's creative engine has absolutely failed. That is something that we've talked about for years. Yep. And I think he's absolutely right. And in order to change that creative engine, you have to change the people that are there. So maybe they do indeed change some of their creatives, change some of their storytellers, but I haven't seen that yet with the Walt Disney Company.
The fear is that they'll fire the innocent people who had their head down trying to do a good job. But folks,
hang on.
We have evidence of that. So we have it. They fired Ike Perlmutter last year. Amid their cuts last year that they were doing. Remember, they had those huge cuts, and he was the guy who was trying to cut costs. And now he's allied himself with Peltz.
Oh no, I just want to give a quick shout out to Dar Ben in the chat and stuff where it says that companies seem to forget ROI.
Well, a lot of people said that
Elemental. I'll tell you that. Yeah.
A lot of people said that Elemental made money, and it's like, okay, well, I had it losing $100 million. People came at me and saying, your math is wrong and all this kind of stuff.
They're firing people because it did so great, Vash.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You don't lay off as much as 20%. If that film actually did well right there. And by the way, this flies in the face of what Bob Iger was saying. He was like, "Oh, we're done with the fixing. Now we're in the building mode." Well, apparently not. And this is right before quarterly earnings report right here and before the annual shareholders meeting. So this absolutely has to do with Nelson Peltz and the financials atrophying the company right now.
Woke doesn't work, and if you go woke, you don't work. That's I think what we have learned here. There is an exception. That's if you have an extremely feminine brand such as Barbie. It can work there, but folks, if you want to go full on woke, if you want to go full on woke, there's a cost association now, and I don't think it's worth it. John, you had a thought there?
Yeah, I think that the Barbie worked mainly based on the IP brand, and I think you can probably get it in there for a little bit on that kind of brand recognition. But once people sniff it out, it's an absolute loser in the long term.
I agree, and I think that's why they don't want to do a Barbie sequel. Is I'm not sure that it would have the same wins that this one had. The marketing was fantastic.
No, it's Captain Marvel 2.0.
Yeah,
The Marvels.
And they do not want to set it up for that. All right, well, folks, Pixar dropping 20% of their workforce minimum because they're leaving the door open for more after this year. Very sad for those folks who are losing their jobs, but not unforeseen. And unfortunately, if you were reading the Access drive-by corporate media, you would not have seen this coming. if you follow this channel and channels such as what we have in our orbit, then it makes total perfect sense. Cognitive dissonance about to set in for those who just could not understand that Disney is actually failing.
Floral, it's time for you to walk the plank.
What? Why?
Cuz you haven't subscribed to WDW Pro yet. Nor bookmark thatparkplace.com on your web browser to get great articles from great contributors.
What?